Florencia, you're muted.
Sorry about that. So welcome all to the April meeting. It's good to have you all here. Let me share the agenda on the chat just so we all have it. This is the regular link where we plan our meetings for all of you who are new to the group today. It's always the same link, but that is where you come in and see what we're going to discuss that day for the next meeting. And you can propose any topics you like, anything that you've been working on, any sort of topic that is relevant to the group that you would like to bring up. So the first item on the agenda is always to approve the meeting minutes from the last meeting. This time is the March 14 meetings. They're linked in the agenda. So I hope you had the chance to take a look, or if not, go ahead next time. So if everybody is okay with it, there's no specific opposition, then we consider them approved. All right, so we have, Eduardo, we have the ROS to DDS security.
Yeah. It's a very quick update on that subject, because on the last working group, I was not here, but apparently it was advised for us to open a request enhancement proposal. So we did that. Unfortunately, no one from OSRF or OSRC have reviewed it. So I don't know if it's going to, freeze was yesterday, so I actually don't know if it's going to make it to Iron or not. I asked the guys at Intrinsic whether they would consider it, but they're not responding to my message. So I don't know. I don't know what to do there really, because the work has been done, or it's ready for 3 months already, and then I'm afraid they're not going to include it on Iron, because they would say that the freeze was yesterday. So, but it's really no update from our side other than we opened the rep as requested. I don't know how much leverage do we have really to push for open robotics or Intrinsic or whoever needs to do something there to actually do something.
So this time you're just waiting for the maintainers to take a look and review.
Yeah, and I asked them on Slack. I think Rufus as well there on a channel, on a Slack channel with ROS core developers, and they just didn't answer to my message.
You were on a Slack channel?
Yeah, on the OSRF ROS core developers channel.
Good.
I think you're there, aren't you?
There's an official Discord. I didn't know there was an official Slack.
Oh, I thought you actually were here.
Is that the internal Slack to Intrinsic, or formerly?
It's OSRF.
Okay. It's kind of hard to keep track of all these.
too many Slack channels. I agree.
I'll just reread the rep, and I can give my approval, but I don't have merge privileges on that.
No, of course not.
Are there any previous reviewers we could maybe ping for more recently merged PRs?
On the ROS infrastructure, you mean?
No, the rep.
Oh yeah, okay.
So if I go to close repos,
Miguel Company just pinged Tomoya Fujita and Chris Laganstead. The thing is, they never on the design. They also didn't answer back.
package version. What about Chris? Is he active? I think this probably is going to be close to Chris's domain because it's dealing with R&W.
Yeah, I'm not sure. That's what I wrote on the Slack, that I don't know who to ping, but I know that, I mean, right after they were having a conversation between
Oh, okay.
Chris
I see. Yeah, just a minute ago. This is pinned. Okay.
I don't have anything else to have on that subject. I mean, just waiting for the feedback there. I really hope they consider, making or including that into iron. I don't know.
The other thing is there's also the ROS Discord where some of the folks may
I'm
be
not
more
there.
active.
I'm not there. I mean, Slack and the element thing for the security working, there's too many chat applications.
I'll post on the Discord room then.
Thank you.
It's general. Was this announced also on the ROS discourse web form? Usually a lot of reps are announced there to get attention. I know Tully is kind of a fan of making sure reps are posted there.
Yeah, the design was, I think, mentioned some ROS discourse because I think they discussed it on the TSC, I guess.
Oh, okay, then that's their word.
Yeah, on the TAC from February, it was discussed.
Okay.
I just realized I was not on the March security working group meeting, and I'm realizing that from February we had opened a fix for the chain of trust vulnerability. If you remember, just saying that it's already on 2.10, which is the version which will be on Iron.
Excellent.
So it's that's all on our part. I completely forgot about commenting that.
Great work. It's good to have that upstream.
So it's going to make its way into Iron. It's already on roll. And I think we backported it. And I don't know if there is any other topic.
I don't have any. Well, I guess as in the miscellaneous, is anyone familiar with security ramifications of using dev containers or maybe just Docker in general? I'm trying to get back into some setup, and I'd like to see how feasible rootless containers are for ROS deployment. But I think there's some fairly heavy-handed permissions or resource requirements that would be needed for optimal like ROS use cases, like shared memory access or inter-process communication, or the process discovery.
Right. With FastDDS, all that works within Docker containers. Intra-process will always work. For the share memory mechanisms, there are some caveats. First of all, you need to run the Docker containers with the host IPC mode or the shared IPC mode, so they share the memory map files. And then there is one caveat, that is, if you run all your containers with root permissions, the files that they will create will have root as user as group. And then if you go on your host and launch a subscriber, it will not be able to receive data because it will not have permission. It will decide that it needs to communicate through shared memory because it can access to the shared memory, but then it will not have access. And that's something that we plan on fixing. Try to see if we have the correct permissions to open the file, and else fall back to UDP. But that's a small caveat we have right now. If there is a publisher publishing on a Docker container, then a normal subscription on the host will not be able to receive data if they're communicating over shared memory.
And that's general. If I was using multiple DDS participants on a single host over across different Unix users.
No, the problem is with the permissions of the files. Yeah, exactly. If one of the users doesn't have permission for another, exactly.
Yeah, okay, yeah. If the DDS processes respond by different users,
yeah,
agnostic of containers, you'd still encounter the same issue.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, you can. It's something that we plan on fixing at some point between here and June, I guess, because it's really a matter of trying to access the file, and then if it doesn't, if we don't have the right permissions, instead of using shared memory, then fall back to UDP if possible.
Another issue I remember is like if you're trying to be conservative in your network access, like let's say you want to use a software-defined network to isolate all the containers.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of using the host network driver, or --net equals host, you could, leave it default to the bridge or something.
Yeah.
And then what it's going to do is all the containers might spawn. I forget the exact setup, but there's an issue based on how the GUID is generated. The unique identifier for the participants.
That is because the UEID
is if you did use host, but you didn't enable the shared memory access.
Exactly.
They're going to see they're on the same device, and they're going to try and do that, and then it's not going to work. And then
exactly
not very obvious to the user why it's not working.
No, but it's actually the same fix, right? Because it will try to access to the shared memory file. It's not there, then it will fall back to shared memory, to the UDP. Okay. So it's actually the same fix. But the problem is that if you do, the host is identified by the hash on the interfaces, on the interfaces.
Oh, okay.
That's why when you share, the network of the host with all the containers, and all of them think they're on the same device. And then you need to do them IPC shared or host between them for communication to work right now.
Okay. That's
But
just a
other than
small
that,
side ahead.
yeah, other than that, everything works out. And with security as well, I mean, Kale, the guys, they are deploying with the SROS and containers everywhere. I don't know if Kale is up here.
Yeah. Sorry, multitasking. What was the question?
That you guys are deploying SROS with Docker with no problems, right?
Yeah, no problems there. I mean, we are using the host networking mode there, but
exactly.
But with SROS, there is no problem. Yeah.
Has anyone had any experience using a Podman instead of Docker, or the preference is always to use Docker to run the container?
We haven't tried.
No experience with Podman at all.
Yeah, I know some people prefer because it doesn't need to. The daemon is not rootless, or does not require root. So we're doing a little bit of work trying to work with people who are doing deployments and working with containers. And I know a few people have mentioned a preference for using Podman because they don't feel comfortable running a root daemon. Just curious to see if anyone else had used it.
I haven't used Podman, but there's also, I think that aside from Podman and Docker, there's another alternative that I think one of the most active ROS users in our community kind of favors. Forget what it's called. It's like C or something. But it's another rootless alternative. And it's interchangeable in that you can, like, I guess like Podman, you can use Docker images, but then the runtime is like managed by their own setup. Does Podman use containerd, or does it use something, a different runtime entirely?
Yeah, I think it does use containerd.
Oh, okay. At least because I've been getting into dev containers, most of that's just kind of biased towards Docker and Docker Compose. So that's, I think, what a lot of people are just kind of going with the flow. But yeah, it's kind of annoying that, the Docker rootless isn't quite as simple, or it's not default. And there's a lot of like legacy images and stuff like that that kind of assume root. The ROS images right now are kind of like, they don't change the user or anything. And if we did, that'd probably break a lot of things. If you're using kind of like official library images in Podman, do you have to add more layers in the directive to kind of downgrade the user, or does Podman kind of seamlessly use the root account in the container that's not really root outside the runtime?
Yeah, to be honest, I haven't dived deeply in it, and I'm not building a robotics application. I just, from initial conversations with people, they had mentioned like the possibility of using it rather than going with Docker. So I don't have experience personally of deploying like a ROS application with or running it with Podman, but I do, like, anecdotally, I've heard people using it.
So again, were you referring mostly to a use case for development or for deployment of applications, Rafin?
Yeah, the dev container stuff is mainly just for development. I have yet to catch up on the Kubernetes activity on the ROS discourse, but it seems like there's an active sub community that are interested in orchestrating ROS-based applications using Kubernetes.
Yeah,
Seems
just
pretty tricky because doesn't like the default Kubernetes network drivers not support UDP multicasting? Is that like a barrier for discovery?
Yep. Yeah, that's actually part of the reason why we have the DDS router. It's exactly for the it started for the cloud use case of DDS. I'm not the expert here in that, but that's what we are using on the Kubernetes deployments with DDS.
Makes sense.
And it works with ROS too as well. We have some clients using it with ROS too.
yeah, but basically anyway, once you enable ROS2 security, isn't that point-to-point communication anyway?
Yeah, that's
the DDS standard does support multicast with security, and that like it keeps multiple cache keys.
Yeah, the problem is that when you don't have multicast or when you're in one, right? You want to communicate your host with the cloud. With security, it gets tricky because you need to know where the cloud service is, right? Point to it directly, and then that's kind of difficult to configure, right?
Yeah, I understand that part. Yeah.
It's kind of difficult to configure that. So the DDS router does not support security actually. But then when you use security, then what we would recommend is probably TCP transport as well in FastDDS. And then it becomes, some configuration nightmare on the FastDDS side. Actually, one of the things that we're exploring right now. What are the possibilities to go with end-to-end encryption all the way to the cloud in an easy manner, so to say. Because the problem is that you cannot put a relay like the router in the middle, which enables security, because actually the DDS security standard, the discovery is completely encrypted. Also, the RTTS header is also encrypted, so you cannot route it, right? That's why it cannot be done with a middleman, as it should be.
There's in addition to the read and write permission, there's also a relay permission in the DDS security spec. Would that facilitate being able to read the data but not modify it?
Yeah, the problem is that for the Diffie-Hellman algorithm, the packets there on the specification, it's a specific, it explicitly says that the complete RTPS datagram is encrypted, so you cannot see the RTPS header, and thus the router cannot route it to wherever it needs to go, right? You need to know where it goes when you send it. So it's meant so that part of the security handshake, you need to do it peer-to-peer directly. You cannot have anyone in the middle. And then if you don't have the handshake, then
how about if the customer or the user, if the use case was lax enough, could they get away with changing the governance configuration to have the discovery traffic unencrypted, but still have the data payload?
Everything except for that. That's the thing, that the spec is very specific about it. If we could have some, extension to disable that encryption, right, on the key exchange there. But then, kind of a security vulnerability, that's why it's the other way. It could be done. We just don't have it. On the specification, they just didn't consider it. So there is nothing you can change in the governance or permissions file or anything to change that. It's something that we'll need to do as DDS vendors on an extension.
Okay, gotcha.
And then the only thing you can do right now with FastDDS is set initial peers, right? We say the TCP transport because we support the server's name indication. annotations on the TCP transport. So then what you can do is on the cloud, you can deploy a service entry point, that has many different services behind. And then you communicate, you only need to know about the entry point. And then you specify to which server you want to communicate, to which service you want to communicate with a name. Right? And instead of, needing to know where every node on the cloud is, where the entry point to the cloud is. And then from there, with the service name, they kind of are routed to wherever they need to go.
Is the routing fairly dynamic? Because like this is something you could do for multi-robot systems, where it's because it seems like ROS has always had some difficulty in coordinating or formulating multi-robot systems. Like pushing everything down into sub namespace is pretty brutal in terms of breaking configs or debugging or introspection or crosstalk communication. Like some topics you might want to bridge over and some topics you don't. And so when they're all on sort of the same axis, that makes it sort of tricky to be fine-grained.
Yeah, with ROS, you would need, the thing is for that, you would need one DDS participant to communicate externally and one DDS participant for the internal topics, right? And that translate into different ROS contexts. So in principle, it could be done. You could have a context that you use, and then the entities on that context you use to communicate with the outside or also with the outside. And then you could have a context which is only for the local area network communications.
Yeah, and then they could be put across different domains. I recall something that might be was in the works if the OMG group was like domain names or domain tags. Did that
Domain
ever
tags, yeah.
Okay.
Domain tags, yeah. It's on the RTBS specification, but it's not yet on the DDS spec. There's anything about that yet. If I'm not mistaken. I think that there is nothing about domain tags on the DDS specification. It's only on the RTBS specification already supports sending a domain tag, but it's not clear how DDS should use that.
That's all I had.
That's all I have as well. I don't know, Florentia, is there anything else to discuss?
Nothing more on my end.
Yeah, nothing from me either.
Thank you.
Maybe we can adjourn, but maybe we'll just remember if you guys want to review and approve the Rep 2015, and maybe that'll get the others.
Yeah, that'd be amazing.
Others' attention from Intrinsic.
Yeah, it's rather short. It doesn't take long to do anything. So.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I'm actually officially even a member. I have had a pull request pending quite long for the membership. I just got this back to my mind, so I need to check what status on that.
I will ping the guys again. If they don't come back on GitHub, I will ping them in Slack. Let's see what happens there. See if I can get a hold of Chris or something.
Okay, sounds good.
All right.
See you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Ciao.
See you next time.